Welcome to the Daily Dawg Podcast. This is episode number 35. It is Tuesday, October 21st, and this is our game reactions to the Ole Miss game from last weekend. This was week 8. Georgia has now played 7 games on the season, and the Ole Miss game was one of the biggest and most exciting games of the season. So today we're just going to jump in and go through a series of reactions like we did last week. Little bit of analysis, and maybe we'll spend a little bit more time breaking it down by the numbers a little more, although I'm not so sure. We might just go ahead and move into talking about where we stand at this point and looking at some of those other teams in the mix now for the SEC and the national championship. So we're certainly back in that consideration. I think we might have all been a little disappointed and started to wonder if this team could be a team that seriously was a contender for the SEC and for the national championship. But here we are. We started the season number 5, and we're back to number 5, 7 games in. So one thing I'm also noticing, a lot of people are really taking note of what Alabama has done, including the win against us. They have now won 4 straight games against ranked teams, and these are teams that weren't just ranked at the time they played them, they're still ranked. So Alabama has probably put together the strongest and best resume of anybody out there so far. Certainly a very impressive on their part. And Georgia is also putting together an impressive resume. We now have wins over a pair of top 20 teams, including a top 10 team. Ole Miss gained a lot of respect, or sort of burnished their respect. I guess they had respect since they had come in as the number 5 team, undefeated at 6-0, to the game with Georgia this last weekend. They come out of the game having lost the game, only falling to number 8 in the AP rankings. So I think that's a nice statement. I mean, we were number 5 and we lost at home to Alabama by 3 points, and we fell all the way down to number 12. So we lost 7 ranking slots. So I think Ole Miss certainly gets some credit for going on the road. The same thing happened when Tennessee lost to Georgia at home, lost to us at home. We go to Neyland Stadium. We eke out that overtime win, the exciting, thrilling fashion it was. And Tennessee basically came into that game ranked 15th. They came out of that game essentially ranked 15th or something very close to it. So it's interesting. You're seeing Georgia kind of get a little bit of a knock. I mean, I was going to do a whole segment, and it kind of became outdated, how when you had this kind of comparison where Penn State was hosting game day, the same day we were hosting Alabama, SEC Nation came to campus in Athens, and game day went to Penn State for the big whiteout game that they were having when Oregon came to town. And look, that was fair. That was a matchup of number 6 versus number 3. So I can't complain, even though we had an impressive and exciting matchup with Alabama and Georgia. And honestly, maybe one of the reasons that game day didn't come was Alabama not doing their part in this series. Having lost that first game of the season to Florida State, Alabama came into the game only ranked at number 11. So our game was like a 5 versus 11 matchup versus a 6 versus 3. So I understand why game day went there. But the comparison I'm getting at, though, was that there was these 2 big games, Georgia hosting Alabama, and sort of this question, can Georgia finally get over the Alabama hurdle? Penn State, of course, can they get over the hurdle of beating anybody who's in the top 15? And especially, they'd already lost to Oregon last season. So this was a big moment for them. And of course, now we know what happened. They go on to lose 3 straight games, 2 straight games, and they're out of the top 25. But initially, they got kind of a better deal out of the loss. They fell just, they did not fall as far out of the top 5, out of the top 3 coming into that game. They're number 3 in the nation, and then they fall down just like 4 spots to number 7, whereas Georgia falls 7 spots and all the way out of the top 10 when we lose to Alabama. Both games that were close, basically field goal games. And you know, at the time I had my sort of Georgia chip on the shoulder, which some friends and fans, especially non-Georgia fans who know me, will tell you I get that little chip on my shoulder. I'll look around and I'll see the comparison and where the national media, where the SEC media and everybody is judging us. And I think to myself, well, wait a minute, why are we being treated that way? That was certainly one of those times. I never got a chance to do a big segment on that. We had a lot of other things to deal with and get onto. And our changes and technical efforts to try to bring this thing to a video podcast and the challenges that's brought us set back some of our time and took away a few of our shows as we were working to bring this to you. So, long story short, though, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, in typical fashion, I often do as a aggrieved Georgia fan, why are we getting the short shaft? And yet, I guess in a way, now I'm looking at it and say, well, here we go. Teams that lose to us actually get quite a bit of respect. Ole Miss comes out of this game against Georgia, and I don't think they take a very big hit, especially compared to what we've seen for teams losing out of the top 10. Miami, now, of course, this is a bigger deal. Miami this last weekend, or on Friday night, has Louisville come to town. Louisville at the time is an unranked team, and of course they beat Miami, as we already discussed, at home. And it was a close game and a one-score game, but they actually just a three-point game, 24-21. But Miami does drop the game, and they fall all the way from being number 2 all the way down to 10th. So that's a pretty big drop, an eight place drop in the top 25. So Ole Miss comes to Athens. They play Georgia tough. They lose a game by 8 points, and they fall just from number 5 down to number 8. So I would say they picked up a measure of respect that on a certain level, the question is, hey, Ole Miss is undefeated. They look like a potential playoff team, or at least they have some of the pieces that we might say. Defense is a little shaky, and as Georgia fans, we can relate to that lately. But they certainly had a high-powered offense. They're doing a lot of things right. They had a nice win against LSU. That win has been looking a little less impressive with each week that goes by. LSU's early credentials were beating Clemson on the road to start the season, and that appeared at the time to be a matchup of two teams that were possibly playoff national championship contenders. We now know that Clemson is working hard to be a bowl contender at this point. So LSU's luster from that win definitely came down a little bit, and then just the way LSU's played has been a little bit like Georgia, kind of disappointed people. People are looking for them to be stronger offensively, figured they would be good defensively. So people are looking for that game control that I talk about a lot, where LSU comes into games and kind of beats people up. I think people are looking for LSU to assert themselves as a dominant SEC team, winning games like 34-17, 34-14. They're holding people to the 17-14 part, but they're having a hard time scoring a lot more than that themselves. And so because of that, LSU's lost some luster. So you see they've fallen down, and now they've taken a second loss, having already lost to Ole Miss earlier in the season. Now they've taken a loss to Vanderbilt as they went on the road last weekend and lost to Vanderbilt. So LSU's taken a little bit of hit, and that's coming into the game with Georgia. That's Ole Miss's biggest claim to fame on the season. So now, in many ways, I think if you look at their resume and you look at the way the pollsters are treating them coming out of this game, they look at Ole Miss and they say, well, Ole Miss is legit. They went to Athens and they played them tough. They could have won. They led by 2 scores late in the fourth quarter and they lost, but they didn't take that big a hit. They're still a top 10 team. And frankly, if you look at their schedule, just as a jump ahead to some things we're going to talk about, they're well positioned to still be a contender here for the SEC. Their schedule is very manageable. They could win all of their remaining games. They have a tough assignment this coming week. They have to go on the road yet again and go play Oklahoma, who has a tremendous defense, and it's hard to say exactly how good the offense is. They did not look good in the Red River rivalry against Texas. But Mateer was just coming back off the hand surgery, and he's clearly the bulk of the offense. But he looked good this last weekend, and Oklahoma got back up on the horse. And that may be a little bit of pun since they have that funny-looking horse mascot. But anyway, so Oklahoma gets back in the column, looks a little better offensively, and now they have Ole Miss coming to town. So that may be a tough stretch for Ole Miss, having to go on the road in back-to-back weeks against Georgia and Oklahoma. But Ole Miss, I think, has the talent and the capability to win that game, and they have the talent and the capability to win all of their remaining games. So I don't think this loss in any way takes them out of the SEC running, and it definitely doesn't take them out of the playoff running. I think they've got a good chance from where they're positioned here as the number 8 team. Even if they take a second loss somewhere down the stretch and can finish 10-2, I think Ole Miss overcomes last year's failures at 10-2 and makes it to the playoff. So, but I think they do still need to go 10-2. And of course, that's really what the assignment was last year as well. All they had to do was go 10-2. And of course, they dropped the game to Florida. So let's get back to our reactions. This was an exciting game. Okay. I think everybody was really fired up. And, first and foremost, what are our reactions? Gunner for Heisman, right? I mean, I know that's a little dramatic seeming, but honestly, if you look at his performances, the way he essentially just willed the offense against a really great defense. I mean, I think Auburn, the longer we watch them play, the more we realize their defense may be being underrated. Their offense is so behind where it should be that their defense is just playing a tremendous amount of football games against good teams. They've played 4 ranked opponents back to back. They've suffered 4 one-score losses in the process, and they've really had no help at all from their offense. It's been the defense that's kept them in those games, and the offense that's usually failed to build on what has actually been a lead in several of those games, if not all of them. I haven't gone back and looked at the game flow of all of them, but certainly against us, they had a lead, 10-0 lead. And then they were able to hold that lead even into the third quarter. They had a 17-10 lead on Missouri this last week. And then just any points at all maybe would have kept Missouri from being able to get back on top. But Missouri's able to get a touchdown, tie the game up, put it in overtime, and take the game away from them in overtime. So I think Auburn, is really showing itself to be a great defense. And the reason that matters is because Gunner was really quite exceptional against Auburn. I mean, he basically put the team on his back, and I think a lot of people saw that sort of Superman dive into the end zone, even if Kirby would have preferred him to take a knee. A lot of people saw that and saw the comparison of Cam Newton, it looks like, diving into the same corner of the same end zone back in his Heisman winning campaign. And you see that Superman moment. And at that time, it was maybe a little early to talk Heisman. And honestly, look, it's maybe still a little early, but let's be honest, Gunner is becoming a big story of this season. And this is playing out a lot like it did for Georgia with Stetson Bennett, where we're watching this guy be a difference maker, be possibly the guy who's just will and grit and determination, along with overall really good play and big clutch moments, was a difference in being a champion. And even while we watched it happen, even while he did it the first time, we came back and we questioned him and we said, well, should we start somebody else, the next season? Should he be the starter? So he wasn't even the unquestioned starter coming into the follow-up season to his first quarterbacking effort as the national championship quarterback. So I think we're kind of doing the same thing here with Gunner. There's a sense of like, well, Georgia wanted somebody else. I talked about early in the season, and I do want to take a moment here and just mention about this. I talked early in the season about how it wasn't surprising. Kirby has always been willing to stack however much talent he can at every position. You can always have talent, you can always have competition, and then figure out what to do with it later. So I didn't take it as particularly a knock. I mentioned earlier in the year on Gunner that they went and took a look at Fernando Mendoza, who was making a clear pitch to move somewhere else from California last year, and has a very NFL arm, NFL physique, and had demonstrated a lot of poise and high-level prospect as a quarterback. And so I didn't find that surprising. I didn't necessarily think it meant that, oh gosh, the coaches don't feel like they can win with Gunner and they need to go out and get a different quarterback. And I brought this up before. I will say, look, having seen what Mendoza's doing at Indiana right now and the way he has developed under another quarterback coach who's done a great job bringing quarterbacks in Cignetti, who's getting the most out of quarterbacks, I can see why Mendoza was willing to go there. I understand now that Mendoza did come to campus, I guess, talk to Kirby and the staff, and apparently chose Indiana instead of Georgia. Hard to say, what was available in terms of money. Hard to say what other things were offered. Indiana, I think, did at nothing else have an absolute clear vacancy, and he was basically going to be the unchallenged starter, and he would have had to fight for the role with Gunner, a guy who's been in the program 4 years, if he had come here. And so I think it makes sense that he went where he went, and it makes sense that we, continue to have Gunner. But I just wanted to put a little correction on that and say, look, Mendoza's obviously an elite top-level quarterback, and I don't know if we would have been a better team with or without him, and I don't fault the coaches for going after him. And even as Gunner emerges, and I get really excited about what Gunner's doing for us, I still don't think that was anything more than a very reasonable move for coaches to take a look at all the options and see what's going on there. But I also wanted to say it might have been a little bit more than that, because gosh darn it, Mendoza does look good. So if anybody's leading the Heisman race right now, it's Mendoza. But I think Gunner has done enough in these last couple of weeks where he's put himself on the radar. Whenever you take a loss, even though he played pretty well against Alabama, certainly played well against Tennessee, and you could argue there was a Heisman moment in there. That fourth down pass to London Humphreys that we've talked about so much has a very Heisman moment feel. You could argue that the Superman dive into the end zone, putting the punctuation on the Auburn game, has a little bit of a Heisman moment feel. And now this performance on Saturday against Ole Miss definitely has Heisman-esque feel. And this is obviously his best game of the year. He completes 84% of his passes in the game. He's 26 of 31, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. He runs for another 59 yards on 10 carries and another touchdown on the ground. So he's responsible for 349 yards and 5 touchdowns. And he's also piloting an offense that scored on every drive when they touched the ball. I mean, technically, yes, they got the ball one last time after forcing Ole Miss last desperation drive to turn the ball over on downs. We took a knee a couple times and called it a game. But that's not a drive where we were trying to score. Every drive with the game in doubt, every drive that the team got the ball, they scored. And I mean, that has happened before in football. That's happened for other teams. I honestly don't remember. I can't think of a game in all the years I've watched Georgia football where that's happened at Georgia. It maybe or probably has. Certainly if you go back to the ground and pound era of the 1980s, the Herschel Walker days, there's a decent chance that we only had 5 or 6 drives in a game and scored on all of them in that era. I mean, those games were just different the way the clock and the timing went, thanks to the run game being so prevalent, not just for Georgia, but for all teams. I mean, the predominant way college football teams moved the ball in that era was running the ball. But let's get back to high praise of Gunner. I mean, Gunner definitely, at this point now, you look at his stats, he's completing over 70% of his passes on the year. He is Georgia's leading touchdown responsibility person. He has willed the offense against a really good Auburn defense that on the road when down, and he has again done all of this under tremendous pressure. Against Alabama, he rallies the team back, and as I've said many a time, we should have won, but he does enough to get the team in position to win, getting down to where we could have taken the lead in the fourth quarter inside the Alabama 15-yard line in the fourth quarter with a chance to take the lead. He gets Tennessee. He goes toe-to-toe with Tennessee, who puts up 500 yards of offense in a raucous home crowd stadium, and he goes on the road in his first ever road game, and he puts up a huge game and throws for over 300 yards and guides the Georgia offense to 500 yards of offense, and really answers questions about could he be just the starting quarterback. But now we see maybe it's more than that. Then he just has a super gritty, gutty performance at Auburn where he truly carries the team, has really good numbers overall, maybe not as flashy as the Tennessee game or this game against Ole Miss. And now this Ole Miss game where, and I don't know if there's any one moment you could look at the pass. I think a huge moment in this game is the the pass to Dylan Bell on 2nd and 12. We have one of our few lost yardage plays of the day on the drive, where now we're up by 5 and we have the ball and we have a chance to really put this away. If we can score a touchdown, we're up by a clear 2 scores and this game is over. Ole Miss is going to get the ball back, probably not with enough time to come anywhere near scoring twice. In the end, we're going to get a field goal on this drive and we're going to go up by 8. That ends up being more than enough because Ole Miss will go nowhere. But when you're looking at strategy, you're thinking we got to get this thing at least by 8, because that way you've put it in a position where Ole Miss could possibly tie the game, but they're going to have to drive the length of the field, score a touchdown, and get the 2-point conversion. And yes, our defense has been leaky all season. It's been leaky beyond measure in this game, it feels like. And so you wouldn't want to just say it's over. In previous years, Georgia defense, you might have said there's no chance a team, even really great teams, are going to march the length of the field, get the touchdown and the 2-pointer. But, cause for concern. So at least at a minimum, I think it's a huge deal that Ole Miss does not ever get the ball with a chance at the end to win the game outright, right? If you don't get that field goal at least, now it's a 5-point game and Ole Miss could actually score a touchdown and win the game. And that's dangerous. You already saw Ole Miss have one busted play that went for 75 yards. We remember the Alabama game last year where you take the lead and you just have a less than 2 minutes or less to go in the game, and Alabama scores the play or the touchdown on a 1-play drive or a 2-play drive, and boom, again, now you're behind and you're fighting for a chance to get the win in a game that you've done everything you needed to. So it certainly could happen. It hasn't historically been something we think can happen to a Georgia defense, but the last 2 seasons we've come to expect that we are mortal like other teams, and it could happen to us. So this is a big drive. Is all of them I'm getting to, that Georgia gets the ball and goes down the field the last time it had the ball offensively, and again, not just taking a knee, goes down the field and gets this field goal. And a big play in this drive is we take this lost yardage play at 2nd and 12, one of the few times we're behind the sticks just a little bit. It's not terrible, but this constant scoring, this methodical effort on the drives seems to be driven a lot by the fact that we were just almost always gaining some yardage every play. We very rarely were looking at some 3rd and 13, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9 even. Most of the time we had makeable, manageable 3rd downs, and that's a testament to how Gunner was running the game. At this point in the game, Gunner drops back and he's clearly going for a deep pass. And at the moment he's doing it on 2nd and 12, with kind of the game still hanging desperately in the balance, and we desperately need at least the 3 points to make this a comfortable, defendable position. I see him going for this deep pass, and my first thought, and I haven't developed, I'll admit as a fan, I have not yet developed this confidence that when he drops back and he's going deeper, that I believe that he's picked out a clear path and that's going to be a winning play. I will tell you the opposite is true. By the time Stetson Bennett left Georgia, whenever, and see, here's where the view you get, right? If you're watching on TV, if you're there at the game, maybe you can pick out where the receivers and where the plays are going downfield. But if you're watching it on TV, most of the time, any pass that's over 20 yards, even in the modern era of 1080p and 4K widescreen 16:9 format TV, even in this era, most of the time the camera shot is tight enough that when the quarterback drops back, the view that you have does not show you receivers that are 20 yards downfield. So any kind of a deep pass, when the quarterback first loads up and releases the ball, you're going to have the camera pan downfield before you have any idea who he's actually targeting and how open are they. So he drops back, clearly he's loading up for a deep pass. He lets the ball go. And at the moment he's doing it, I'm thinking, is this the play? No. We can't get in 3rd and long. Because I'm thinking if this doesn't work, I'm immediately envisioning, oh no, he's going deep. And if this doesn't connect, it's going to be 3rd and 12. This drive's going to stall. And I'm terrified that we're going to give Ole Miss back the ball with a chance after everything we've done to come in and steal this game because it's only a 5-point lead. And they break off a touchdown and take it at the end. That's what I'm terrified. And I'm admitting, so going back to Stetson Bennett, but down the stretch, I had come to have that kind of confidence when Stetson Bennett dropped back and I can't see on TV what's down there, but he goes back to throw. I almost always was already celebrating because if he saw something downfield, almost always he saw something that was a not a wide open play every time, but something that he felt confident he could hit. And one of the underrated aspects of Stetson Bennett's game was he actually, for not being a huge guy, he had a really strong arm and a sharp, quick release, and he was also really accurate. And that's one of the things that I think we lost with Beck, as good as Beck is. And I think Beck is a really good quarterback. And he's very accurate and he's got a very strong arm. He was not very accurate on deep throws. Our ability to break open those plays, a few plays a game where we're able to go 38, 40, 45, 50, 60 yards, or if you think about the big play to Arian Smith in the Ohio State game in the semifinals in 2022, where, we're trying to get back in that game and we're down 11 points, I think. And Stetson, again, just what I'm talking about, drops back, rears back to throw. And I can tell you, I remember in this moment, as soon as he went back to throw it, I just assumed or knew somebody was deep and down there. It just had that Stetson's body language. You could almost just see it when he loaded up. You could see almost a certain something in his body language that says he knows he's got this. He corks that thing, uncorks it, and it starts flying downfield. The camera pans down there, and what do we find when the camera's down there? Our hopes and dreams are alive, because there's Arian Smith just running wide open by himself, and you're just thinking, oh, please just catch it. Please just catch it. Here it goes. And he does. He catches it, runs in the end zone. It's like I think it was a 75 or 80 yard touchdown. We're back within a score, and that becomes all the difference in that Ohio State game. So Stetson's dropping back, and I guess this is the transition. I'm admitting that I am transitioning here now to believing in Gunner. I believe in Gunner's ability. I've told you a couple times that I believe that our offense, I told you in my breakdowns and predictions coming into the Ole Miss game that I believe that our offense would be able to consistently grind out yardage and points and possession of the ball in this game against Ole Miss, because I'm believing in Gunner from what he's done so far. But now I'm starting to believe in big play Gunner. I'm starting to believe in a Gunner that knows when to take the shot and when not to. And, that's the thing. I mean, coaches, if they trust you, they give you some of these reads, and, there's always a chance. I mean, a quarterback can always go rogue, even if the offensive coordinator didn't particularly call for the deeper play, but there's just times where maybe they're going to want to try to take that deep shot. Ego's going to say, I think we can hit that. And, again, Stetson Bennett was really great at taking shots when they were there. And I have not yet come to believe that Gunner necessarily knew that, and that he's necessarily got a read on when they were. But he has hit some great shots. He hit the shot early in the game to Colby Young. Unfortunately, it may be the last play we see Colby Young for a while, because we've now learned he has some sort of a fracture in his leg coming off that play, but he hits him on that 36-yard pass on the first drive. He hit London Humphreys on the famous fourth down play now against Tennessee. And, he's hit some big plays. There was maybe an underrated play. I know I mentioned it in the Auburn game, the 30-yard pass where, again, Gunner kind of climbed the pocket a little bit. He rolls out, drops back, then climbs up the pocket a little bit, unleashes a nice strong throw down the hash and to Noah Thomas, who catches the ball and isn't able to get in, but brings the ball right down to the 1, 2, 3 yard line, and Georgia's able to punch that in and get that touchdown. So I think we're starting to see Gunner emerge as a guy who, when he's taking the shot, he's taking a realistic shot, and he's getting the ball out there with accuracy and with a chance for his guy to win on that play. So this pass goes to Gunner in, like I said, at 2nd and 12. It's on our last drive of the game where we're going to score the field goal to go up by 8. And Gunner uncorks a 36-yard pass to Dylan Bell, and that gets us, we're basically almost guaranteed from here a field goal. I mean, I didn't pull the yardage, the down and distance on this, but I mean, this is flipping the field. It's getting off our side of the field and into their territory. This is giving us a chance now to settle back in to a drive that's going to help us burn clock. It's just almost a perfect timing, I mean, sure, a long touchdown would have been awesome, but then Ole Miss would get the ball back, yes, down 2 scores, but with 4 or 5 minutes to play. Instead, we're in plus territory. We almost know we got a field goal with our kicker in the bag, but now we're at a point where we can start bleeding time on the clock, right? And we don't need to be in any hurry here. We can run the ball. We can grind it out. The longer it takes to come to the resolution, whether it's touchdown or field goal, the better it's going to be. So I think I just can't say enough really about Gunner. I mean, this is just an amazing performance. Again, 84% completion, 289 yards, 349 total yards, 5 touchdowns, and every single offensive drive when we get the ball with the intent to score and not just take a knee, every single drive results in points. Now, I guess you could quib, and I will a little as we go on, that we did settle for 3 field goals in the game. So they're not all touchdowns. And that's the reason this game felt a little more tense than it might have under different circumstances, because Ole Miss is not going to settle for touchdowns. They're going to score on their first 5 drives. We're going to score on our first 8. But their first 5 drives are all going to be touchdowns. And that's why this game is so tight. And that's why they lead in a big chunk of this game. I mean, it's actually kind of amazing that they were able to build a 9-point lead, given the fact that we never didn't score and they never didn't score. So kudos to them. So a couple other reactions, quick hitters. Okay, just for history, documenting history, we're now 34-13-1 all time against Ole Miss. We came into this game as a 7.5-point favorite, and we won by 8. I believe this is our 3rd straight time now we've covered after being a little bit of a Vegas disappointment. It had been pointed out that we were winning games, and again, I don't bring this up. I'll just say again as a quick reminder, I don't bring this up because I really care anything about people's gambling. If people ask me, what I think, and my advice helps them decide what they're going to do about gambling, wonderful, I guess. I don't care. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not morally like, gambling shouldn't exist. I don't care if people gamble, really. I don't like it. I don't like the culture that surrounds the gambling of sports. I like the purity of the sports. I like watching the sports for the sports. I don't need the extra adrenaline, the adrenaline junkie idea that I need to have money on this or that or some other part to really enjoy this, or I'm going to watch all these games and bounce from game to game because I got money over here and money over there. I mean, again, that it's almost like a drug addict. And I know gambling can be an addiction or problem, but I mean, just like I said, I think the best thing is what I just said. It's almost like these guys who invest in sports in that way are just adrenaline junkies. And I am not an adrenaline junkie. I love sports for the beauty and the purity of what they are. I mean, it is the greatest show you can watch, right? I'm a movie buff too. And I love literature. I was comparative literature minor, history major. Like I've told you before, I love stories. I love history and historical stories. I love pulling it all together. And I love learning what we can about our culture through these things. And sports to me is one of the great investments of culture, because you don't know what's going to happen. When you watch an action movie, almost all the time, the hero wins. You don't know how he's going to do it necessarily, but the writing puts the guy or the girl into this the hero into this difficult situation, then most of the time they're going to pull it out and they're going to be victorious. And a lot of times critical acclaim may not follow a super happy ending, but fan acclaim often does come with that. Well, this is a story. Our hero is the hero of our story of the Georgia Bulldog football team, and Gunner Stockton and C.J. Allen and the other players that are out on the field, Kirby Smart, the coach. So these are the heroes. This and the story we're watching, it unfolds in front of us, and we think we know what's going to happen. I make predictions, and when you have a team that has all the resources and talent of a team like Georgia, then historically it wins. Georgia wins over 130 years plus of football or whatever it is now. Georgia does historically win almost 70% of the time. So it's not exactly like it's an unknown. We can look at a lot of games and say, well, I think Georgia's going to win. And 70% of the time throughout history, you're probably right. But specifically, though, we didn't know how this game would play out. We didn't know exactly what would happen. We make our predictions, and that's what makes it so exciting. It's not a script. It wraps you up into it. The story of the game going back and forth. Georgia scores, Ole Miss scores, Georgia scores, Ole Miss scores. Every time somebody gets the ball, the lead changes in this game. It's dramatic. It's exciting. And you don't know. I didn't know how it's going to end right down to those last minutes. Georgia has the ball. We have a 5-point lead, but Ole Miss Miss has clearly shown the ability. If they can touch the ball for 16 seconds, they could probably overcome a 5-point lead. So we get down there and you're thinking, just let us get that touchdown. If we can get the touchdown, it'll be too much. They won't have enough time. They do just enough to make us go for, yet again, the third field goal of the game. And yeah, it makes sense to get that field goal. Again, go up by 8. It's not quite 2 scores, but it's going to force a touchdown and a 2-point conversion and even with that, the worst that can happen is you get sent into, you can't lose this game. You can only be pushed into overtime. You could lose it in overtime, to be clear, but you can't lose it in regulation. You can't have them steal the victory at the end. A 5-point game, a busted play, and they could win at the end. I mean, think about the Hail Mary Tennessee game from years ago, right? Okay, so we're, and by the way, for the people who are betting, here's that Vegas thing again, right? Pretty amazing. All the things that happened in this game, and the line is 7.5 points, and Georgia wins by 8, which again, that half point always seems to, it's just amazing that they get that close. I think it's interesting. I noted looking at ESPN, again, I've mentioned many a time, they have the model, the FPI model that throughout the game in real time tells you, what the percentages, win chances going on. Ole Miss has an 83% chance. That was the peak. That was their highest chance of winning the game with 1 minute and 43 seconds to go in the third quarter. And this is the moment where Josh McCray gets the ball and he goes 1 yard on, he goes, I guess it was 3rd and 2, I'm trying to think, or 3rd and 3. Anyway, he gains a yard, and that leaves us with the 4th and 1 in the third quarter. That McCray is going to get the ball again, and this is another big moment in this season that you might remember for a long time if this turns into a championship season, when McCray is totally bottled up in the backfield, and somehow he bounces it out to the right and falls forward, and he gets the first down on 4th down from around midfield. And that's a huge moment in the game. The play before that on 3rd down, Ole Miss's percentage chance to win, according to the computer models and all the information available at the moment, peaks at the point of the game. Says they now, from here at this point in the game, just 1 minute and 43 to go in the third, and then the whole fourth quarter, they have an 83% chance to win. So we're going to end up winning this game when Ole Miss has moved to an 83% chance to win. Just speaking again to the superlatives of how amazing the offense was, the offense had 34 first downs in this game. Okay. Kiffin, after the game, in his press conference, was talking about how disappointing it was to be up by 2 in the fourth, going into the fourth quarter, up by 2 on the road against Georgia, a chance to go 7-0, for them to go 7-0 and remain in the top 5 and have a huge win against an elite team, and how that didn't happen. But, he didn't blame his defense, but, he made the point. They just weren't able to execute enough stops. And as good as their offense had been, our offense scores every time it touches the ball. And he pointed out the 34 first downs and how he scored on every drive. And he said, and this is really a great point. He said, that's hard to do against the scout team. And it is. I mean, you would have a hard time running practice with your starters against the scout team and do as well as the offense did. So the offense was at a high level. Gunners that charged that. I don't know if I've ever seen Georgia score on every drive before, and I haven't had any way to figure out if I can look that up yet. If I can find some history on that, I'll bring it to you. There's a few other things that I think are, well, while we're on the topic of Lane Kiffin, I want to say that a couple reactions and thoughts. I said I thought he would do a good job. I said I thought he would come in prepared, and in my predictions leading into the game, I saw the game starting off as a back and forth affair. And I reminded us all that that's how the game went the last time it was in Athens, that Ole Miss actually started off pretty good and it looked like they were underway. And I still hadn't gone back and looked up, and I should have, but I don't remember the exact score. But in my mind's eye, it was something like 10-17, 17 all, that, basically they scored, we scored, they scored, we scored. And that's how the game started the last time they came to town. It was a 7:30 night game in freezing cold weather, I think in November November back in 2023. And that game started off much like this game, back and forth, both teams scoring more than not, and not much defense stopping. And then Georgia, much earlier than we were in this game, was able to wrest control of the game. The defense took over, the offense kept going, and the final score was 52-17, just a complete beatdown. And so I did think that Lane Kiffin, I believe in Lane Kiffin. I think he was a hothead and probably, I mentioned this on the prediction show coming into the game on Saturday. I mentioned that I think that he probably became a head coach a little early and he didn't have the maturity. I think he's a really brilliant coach. His record speaks for itself. He's done a great job. I think he's showed how he can manage games. I was super impressed and frustrated as a fan that he had this so well. You see coaches really consistently just blow the timeout management in games and just do some of the dumbest things with timeouts. I mean, these guys get paid millions of dollars and they have all this time to prep and plan and think all the time about nothing but what they're supposed to do with this stuff. And then you see them just completely bungle it. Well, Lane Kiffin didn't do that. He understood what was happening on that drive I'm talking about, where we go down and we get that field goal at the end. It was ahead of the 2-minute timeout, and he had all 3 timeouts. And as soon as he got us in a second down, that did ultimately become the second down that would lead to the third down, that would ultimately lead to a 4th down in the field goal, he started using his timeouts. And I even would have thought at first maybe it made sense when it got down to about 2 minutes and 15 seconds or so, 2 minutes and 16, I think, at 4th down. I might have even just let that go, let those last 12, 15 seconds go, get to the 2-minute timeout and keep that last timeout and have 1 timeout in my pocket for that last drive. I might have been willing to let those seconds go. Kiffin didn't. He used it. He saved the 15 seconds. And in the end, it worked out. He was able to get the ball back with a full 2 minutes. They didn't go anywhere, but with their offense, that was more than enough time to engineer a touchdown drive and to not be really under much duress. So the time didn't end up being a factor at all in what mattered. And Kiffin gave them a chance to do that just by being superior on site at the time, thinking and knowing and understanding how to use his timeouts. And he certainly came into this game with a great game plan. Not only did he scheme those first couple drives that so many coaches do that were effective, he clearly schemed the whole game. So, I mean, I'm not saying he had a game plan the whole game and he just ran that, but he continuously saw opportunities and things. And one of the things the broadcast did very well is they highlighted how he was calling out to Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback, on the play that became the busted play, the busted tackle that was the 75-yard touchdown to start the third quarter. He saw the one-on-one coverage. He clearly, you can see on the video, is signaling the quarterback, making sure that they see and understand it. The quarterback looks over. He doesn't acknowledge in any way. He just looks around, but clearly he makes the read. He sees what Kiffin saw. Kiffin is ready for it. Kiffin's expecting him to go to that guy. Chambliss does. He hits the guy on the outside. Dalen Everett, of all people, one of our best, most reliable defenders in the backfield, blows the tackle. He comes in too hot and too fast. He overruns it. The guy sidesteps him and runs down the sideline for a 75-yard touchdown. And Kiffin, you can see as soon as the ball's coming that way, he's jumping up and down, and he runs halfway, a la Kirby move that we've seen before. Kiffin runs halfway down the sideline with the wide receiver to the end zone. And again, it's just an example of Kiffin being a brilliant coach. He saw it. He's seeing it from the sideline. He calls it out to his quarterback. He's getting his quarterback's attention, making sure he knows to put the ball over there. This is just a guy who came in with a great offensive plan. He managed the game offensively. He managed the quarterbacks well. He's got a quarterback who was at division whatever, Ferris State, which again, I don't even know where that is. I think I looked it up. It's in Michigan or something like that. Anyway, they made the comparisons on the broadcast how all the road games this guy had ever played in his whole career at Ferris State didn't add up to the attendance in Sanford Stadium. And, but so he's got this guy ready and he performed at a high level. Did not perform as highly, by the way, despite all of the hype about him and a little less hype in the broadcast about Gunner. Did not perform as highly as Gunner. Okay. Gunner clearly outplayed him, even though he was the SEC leader in yards per catch, yards per attempt. Gunner has a very nice, I've talked about how yards per attempt is a a stat that can often be very meaningful for quarterbacks. Gunner comes out of this game with 9.3 yards per attempt. That 9 or above is that elite level. So I think that that's really impressive. A couple other things I want to jump into here. In the end, well, let me do this one first. Talking about the Miami compare, a lot of people are starting to make the Miami comparison. Again, we already talked about how I was able to bring that into the pregame prediction show because we already had the Friday result by the time I recorded the podcast. So we knew that Beck had thrown the 4 interceptions and lost the game to Louisville. A lot of people are bringing in the comparison of the weekend that say, well, look how this has worked out for Georgia. Carson Beck goes out and throws 4 interceptions. Essentially, they're saying he loses the game for Miami. And Gunnar Stockton goes out, has 5 touchdowns, 350 yards, and puts on a masterpiece performance against Ole Miss and essentially wins the game for Georgia. And that's the contrast you get on the same weekend. I don't know that we would or wouldn't have won the game with Beck. And yes, Beck has had a game like that at Georgia before, or a couple games at Georgia like that. Only 1 or 2 that were so bad, like the Louisville game, that we couldn't overcome and win because, again, we had superior talent, so it didn't always have to all be about Beck. But yes, we lost at least a game where Beck had a similar multi-interception game and didn't play well. And this is definitely one thing that's true. Look, Gunnar has this ability because of his willingness and ability and toughness running. Not that Beck never ran. Beck picked up a few important first downs here or there. But you can consistently have the RPO game plan, the read pass option game plan in the playbook on almost every play with Gunnar, creating that threat that has to keep the defense honest and probably helps our offensive line because there's just so hard you can attack. Gunnar has clearly shown, the move he made on that 22-yard touchdown was an amazing read. He should have been sacked in the backfield. 2 guys come in and he makes a little fake and a move and he splits them. He goes right between 2 guys rushing in on him and then just outruns and dinks and dodges people right into the end zone for a 22-yard run. And he's untouched. He never actually gets touched on the run, which is amazing. He should have been tackled for a loss, and he should have been tackled at least another time. And you watch him run, and he's not super fast, but he's smart. He's shifty with the ball. He protects the ball well, and he gets tough and good yards. So, he really accomplishes a lot. It's very impressive what Gunnar's able to do running the ball. And having that RPO part of the game definitely means that our offense, and I talked about this, that we're seeing that. This is a grinded out offense. It's not always a big play explosive offense like we've been in the past, but it is an offense that's hard to stop. We may not put up 600 yards and a series of just 50-yard plays and even 40-yard plays, but you really just can't. This offense can consistently grind clock, grind yards, grind first downs, and put points on. And, there hasn't been so many high lows. The Alabama game is the only game, as I mentioned, that we failed to get 400 yards. And that really was a matter of the fact because we were averaging our highest yard per play of any game this season. That really just became a function of the fact that we were limited in plays by Alabama basically playing our game plan, which was playing keep away and having, like 80 plays in the game and limiting us to 53. So we've talked about that before. So in this game, though, Gunnar, the comparison between Beck and Gunnar, I think the thing that you can say, and this was true a little bit with the Beck-led offense the previous 2 seasons, which was that if we got behind the chains, it was always going to be a matter of whether or not Beck can throw a great strike downfield. And yeah, our line was a little bit shakier each of the last couple of years, and especially last year we had a lot of drops and not as much separation, not as much great wide receiver play, and especially once we didn't have Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey anymore. And so Beck looks like an all-world quarterback when he has those 2 guys. He doesn't look as amazing with the guys we had last year, even though I think there were some really solid players there. But clearly they struggled as a unit, especially with the drops. It's well documented that we led the nation in drops. So, that's the thing that I think the staff was excited about with Gunnar is that when you have a guy who you can have the run, not just as an occasional change of pace or surprise play for a third down to cover a third down, but when you can just have it as part of the package all the time, keeping the defense honest, it makes a difference. And it is true that Gunner has made a difference. I think our offensive line is playing better. I think our running backs are looking more threatening this year than the guys looked last year. I think Gunner adds to that, but I think the real comparison here is I noticed coming into the season, we talked about this leading into the Alabama game. Alabama's run game has not really been good this year, and they consistently still are struggling to run the ball. They had a game or two where they did better, not so much against us, a little bit, but one of the games they had recently, I think maybe against Missouri, I think they ran the ball better than they had all season. But this game, this last week against Tennessee, they did not have a very impressive run game yet again. And one of the things I noticed coming into the game with Alabama is that the Tide is averaging 48 yards less a game this season than they did last year. But last year they had Jalen Milroe, and Jalen Milroe averaged 56 yards a game. So basically, without Milroe, they're just missing that production. There's no replacement in the Tide offense on the run game for the fact that Milroe is not there anymore. And Milroe, certainly you could argue, is as tough a runner as Gunner and more dynamic. I mean, he's clearly faster, bigger, harder to tackle even than Gunner. So he was no reason not to use him in that situation. He was a dynamic runner of the ball. This year, Georgia's averaging 67 more yards per game running the ball after this last game, and Gunner's averaging almost 40 yards a game. So again, that's not all Gunner. Just adding Gunner to last year's totals doesn't get you to this year. This year we're averaging, we're running for, or now we've come down a little bit. We were averaging over 200 yards a game. We did run for over 200 yards in this game. But the Auburn game really hit our average because we sort of flipped the script in Auburn. We just didn't have, Auburn actually outgained us, and we didn't even gain 100 yards rushing in the Auburn game. So that really plummeted our average. We got back to it in this game. We had 45 carries for 227 yards. It's only a 4.9 yard per carry average, but it's actually 49 carries. I'm sorry. So we used the run game a lot, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute and why that was such a big deal in this game. But I just wanted to make that comparison and go back to with the Beck thing, because this is a reaction that's coming out of the weekend, is the comparison of, wow, look how much better off. And this isn't what people were saying coming into the season, right? Coming into the season, like, well, what's Georgia going to be without a proven quarterback? And they let Beck go and they may rue the day. And then Miami takes off. They get all the way to number 2. And there's a lot of best team in the country chatter and Beck for Heisman chatter, right? And then Beck uncorks a 4 interception game. And now all of a sudden the narrative is like, oh, Gunner has a Heisman moment. Gunner plays a game they wouldn't have won with Beck. I mean, look, if Beck had been on the team and threw 4 interceptions, they'd get killed. And so now there's the Gunner comparison. But I do think there is a thing that we all kind of knew was true, but I'm quantifying that run thing and saying, look, when you have the run game as an option on every play, when you can have an RPO as part of almost every play, that's clearly helping our line because people can't just tee off and come after us. And we, despite where we've seen what we feel like has been some shaky blocking, especially with the injuries we had on line early in the season, we've still only given up, I think after this game, 9 sacks on the season, which is very low by comparison to most teams. So, and a lot of that is Gunner being able to get out of sack situations. And a lot of that is because Gunner is a threat as a runner and the run game overall is doing so well, then teams are not able to just sit back. Last year, we're passing the ball 65, 70% of the time. You know, we're only running for 124 yards a game, but we're passing for over 300. People were really able to start to tee off on the idea that, look, Beck is not a great runner. We're passing the ball 3/4 of the time. So everybody's able to skew their offense that way, or their defense that way against our offense. This year, we're able to put an RPO-based offense out there where you never know on every play whether Gunner's going to keep the ball, hand it off, or go into a passing situation, and you can do it out of the same look almost every time. That keeps the defense a little more honest. They can't just cheat on the pass or the run, and it's allowed for this offense to be one that may not be flashy and may not be 50 yards downfield on every play, but can consistently move forward. And you really do see that comparison, like I said, with Milroe and Bama. When Milroe left, even though Ty Simpson is a great quarterback and their offense is, they're in position to be a clear national title contender, SEC contender right now. And that's a lot because Ty Simpson is playing awesome football. But as I said, when we played Alabama, the game really is resting a lot on Ty Simpson, much like the game used to rest on Beck. And so far, Ty Simpson hasn't shown that he might have the kind of meltdown that Beck is prone to. Not that Beck has them all the time. I mean, I think Beck's only had a few of these games, but Ty Simpson so far has not shown any sense that you would expect him ever to have a 4-interception game. So this comparison was being talked about, and I just want to throw it out there. It's reasonably fair because Gunner did show out, and Beck had such a bad weekend, and it flip-flopped the fortunes of Georgia and Miami, because now Miami is behind Georgia, and you're all of a sudden, I don't think, going to hear a lot of Miami best team in the country, and now you're hearing people come back to accepting, hey, this isn't the vintage Georgia team. And this is, I think, a kind of common take right now, right? Hey, we didn't know what to think. This isn't a vintage Georgia team. The defense is clearly not what we're used to. The offense hasn't been as flashy and productive as we might have thought. That being said, as Kirby said himself, you can't kill this team. And here we are again. Yes, we lost a narrow loss to Alabama, but Alabama's looking really dominant. And we beat Tennessee. Now we beat Ole Miss. Here we are again. The SEC maybe is running through Georgia and Alabama. And people are looking at that. And that's a reasonable comparison. And that's a reasonable take from this. So I don't think they should be bashing Beck. I just think he had a bad game. But I will say, as a fan, I am glad, and I do think that our offense has more ability to stay out of down and distance plays that are unfavorable and is more likely. I don't know that a Beck-led offense could have ever, let me sum it up this way. I don't know that a Beck-led offense could have ever produced 8 scores in 8 drives. Because even at his best, he's going to suffer some lost plays. And when he suffers the lost plays, if he doesn't hit a tight throw on one of those downs, then we're usually punting. So we had a lot more. We were still a pretty efficient offense, probably scoring on half or more of our drives on average, if you go back and look at it. But Gunner, I think, is giving us a chance, like you saw. Look, we needed to win this game. We needed to score on every drive, and we did. So a couple other things I was going to say. So going back to the numbers, this game is kind of funny. I got to looking at it, and I started looking at the stats. And I know watching the game, we all had I think it was tense and exciting and exhilarating for all of us the whole game. Sorry, hit the microphone there. And it certainly felt like a game that was on the razor's knife edge. It felt like a game we could lose. Felt like a game we might lose. It felt like a game we'd probably lose. Again, when FPI had us as 83% chance to lose, almost at the end of the third quarter, when we're down by 9, that's not at the same time frame. But when we're down 9 in the second half, you're thinking this could get away with us. When we get the ball, when we're down 2, but then Ole Miss scores, gets the touchdown, the extra point, and they go up by 9. Again, if we don't go back down the field, I mean, a field goal would have at least brought it back to within a touchdown, right? A 6-point game. But we go back down and get the touchdown, and it's back to a 2-point game, and it goes 35-33. And then that's when we get the stop, right? And then all of a sudden, they stop for the first time in the game, and we get the ball back, and now we go down and score. And now it's 35-40. And we're up by 5. And then we get a stop again, and we go back down the field again, and we go up now by 8. And so you've heard the stats. I think you've probably been covered, but they're so impressive and so good, it's worth talking about them again. In the fourth quarter, we outscore them 17-0, and we outgained them 149-13. I mean, as back and forth, and as much as it felt like the defense couldn't stop a thing in the first 3 quarters of the game, the fourth quarter. Now, we talked about this coming into the game, that the second half we'd owned it. We'd owned the second, even against Alabama. Even though we lost, we owned the second half. We owned the second and third quarters against Tennessee. They had a little bit of a riding the ship late in the fourth quarter, but we still were able to exert our will and take that game away from them. And against Auburn, it was a complete flip. They owned the first half, we owned the second half, but we owned the second half way bigger than they owned the first half, especially on the scoreboard, 20 points instead of 10, so a 10-point victory. Well, this game, you go back and you look at it, we outgained Ole Miss in this game, 510 yards to 351. That's a plus 159. So this is one of those game control stats I love. I mean, I will tell you, as I've been watching for years, when I see a plus 159, that's usually a double-digit win. Now, we just missed a double-digit win, right? It's an 8-point win. But it doesn't feel like a double-digit win when you're watching the game, except for I start looking at some of these other stats, these game control stats I've been talking about all season. We're plus 159 on the yardage. We're plus 13 on first downs. I mean, we gave up 21 first downs, but we had 34 first downs in the game. That's an astounding number of first downs. Third down conversions are basically the same. They're 5 of 9. We're 6 of 11. They're both 50-something%. So that's kind of a wash. Time of possession, we talked about. I mean, Ole Miss was a 6-0 team and number 5 in the country coming into the game with a 28.5 minute time of possession, meaning that other teams were averaging having the ball 3 minutes, 4 minutes more a game than they were coming into this. So they were able to win even with that formula. That's usually Georgia's formula for winning, is owning time of possession and trying to get that complementary football Kirby Smart is fond of. Well, we really get that in this game. It doesn't feel like it the way the game flowed. It doesn't feel like it the way your anxiety was up and the way you watch the game and you're like, and watching what seemed to be a performance that was not worthy of Georgia defense. I mean, just even putting Georgia defense, those two words together in the same phrase, and then referencing this game feels like it's sacrilege, right? Except for we actually held them to 350. I mean, 351 yards is not bad. That's not elite. I've talked about anything under 300 yards against any team is usually what I would consider elite, but anything under 400 or especially 350 or right at that 350 mark or below, that's really darn good. And then you have to grade it on the team you're playing. Well, this was a team that came into this game averaging over 510 yards a game of offense. So we held them over 150 yards below their average. Points-wise, they got pretty close to their average. They averaged almost 38 points a game. They scored 35. So they were incredibly efficient. They scored touchdowns, no field goals, on all 5 of their first drives. Very efficient. They'll end up having 8 drives in the game, and they'll score on 5 of 8 drives. And that ends up being the difference because we score on 8 of 8 drives. So, but when you look at it on paper and you see a 510 to 351 game, you see that we out first down them by 13 points, and the time of possession is off the charts. We had a 15-minute better time of possession. We held the ball almost 38 minutes to their 22. It's just a staggering time of possession differential. When you put all those together, if I just saw those stats without having watched this game or knowing anything else about it, you show me all those stats, you say, so what happened here? I'd say, well, the team with those stats probably won by 2 scores, 3 scores maybe. I mean, they should have comfortably won the game. Well, obviously nothing about this game was comfortable for us. But the stats do actually show, as much as we, especially defensively, felt like we were just getting railroaded out there, actually the defense did pretty well. I mean, 351, again, they held Ole Miss to 160 yards less than their average. Now, they didn't generate any turnovers. We didn't get any sacks. I don't even think maybe we had 1 or 2 tackles for loss. I mean, we didn't generate a lot of those things. But the complementary football part, Kirby's, what I perceive, I mean, again, he hasn't shared with me his exact game plan, but clearly an emphasis that I talked about we need to do this season. We need to shut down the run more, and we need to run the ball more so that we can game control more. Well, we're doing that, and we've been doing that all season, and this is another game where we do this. We take away the run from them. They only ran the ball 24 times for 88 yards, which they come into this game averaging 204 yards a game rushing. And Lacey, their running back, was 3rd in the SEC, and even after this game, he's still 3rd in the SEC this week. Averaging almost 90 yards a game. And he came into this game, the game before this game, against Washington State, he was actually on the honorable mention list with the SEC office for Offensive Player of the Week. He had 19 carries for 142 yards, a career high. So he's averaging close to 100 yards a game. He's third in the league coming into this game. He's still third coming out because he's done so much. He's ran for over 600 yards on the season. But we hold him to 36 or 31 yards, 31 or 36, right? It's one of those on 12 carries. So yet again, we take another running back who's in the upper third or better of the SEC, and we shut him down. And we take a run game that has been in the upper third of the SEC, or the near tops, and we shut it down. You know, we take them from averaging over 200 yards a game to 88 yards a game. Their run defense was nothing to brag about. They averaged giving up 150, 160 yards a game, and we gash them for 227. So again, in this game, we do what we've been trying to do all season, which is stuff the run and run the ball. And that's all we take away from them. Obviously, they were able to still pass the ball incredibly well, or it felt like, and they got a lot of production out of what they did because they score 35 points. But the offense the defense did take some things away. They held them to a respectable yardage. They held them in time of possession. They only get the ball 22 minutes. The offense does its part and just grinds out yardage and plays and holds the ball. And that ends up being a big deal. There's only 8 drives for each team in this game, which is the lowest I've seen in a game in quite some time that we've played. And especially the lowest I've seen in a game in which both teams went over 30 points. So this game, this is kind of a risky, I will say, in a way. It can be a risky game plan. When you shorten the game, people talk about that a lot. Well, the best way to keep that offense on the, the best defense is to keep that offense on the sideline, hold the ball and possess the ball. Well, that is good. But if you don't score when you do that, if you shorten the game, if you, in a normal game where you should have 10 or 11 drives, maybe as many as 13 or 15, but at least between 10 and 13, if you take it down to 7 or 8 drives, then you've got to do some combination of score on nearly every drive and try to keep them from scoring on several of those drives. It's not uncommon. Like, you look at a typical Tennessee game, and Tennessee might have 15 drives in a game and score on 6 or 8 of them. So that's the way their SEC leading offense in terms of yardage and points often plays. And Ole Miss is more balanced than that. They do a little bit better job of not being quite such quick hitters. Tennessee's offense, like we talked about, kind of relies on getting going quick and playing at tempo all the time. And Lane Kiffin has built, again, respect what he's doing here, he's built a little broader offense that can work under different scenarios. And he's got a really good SEC running back. Number 3 in the league, he can hand the ball to. And so a lot of times he can get a lead and grind out some plays. Well, one of the things that works in our favor here, neither team really, the one drive they had that was just 2 plays, 75 yards, obviously that took a very short period of time. But for the most part, neither team goes on any of these 8-9 minute drives. But neither team puts up a lot of 1-minute drives either. Almost all the drives are 3 to 5 minutes in this game for both teams. And so both teams are kind of content to just grind the clock here, hold the ball or try to hold the ball. Although ultimately, again, Ole Miss doesn't do that. They only have the ball 22 minutes. But Georgia does. And so Georgia's offense combining to hold the ball, and Georgia's defense, though it did not seem that they put out a very impressive performance, actually does limit them to less production than they're used to, especially running the ball. And Georgia's running the ball is what lets us keep that ball and run the time possessions. We're getting so much productivity out of the run game. That's how we're able to chew the clock. And we also get a huge advantage in this game on plays. We go back to, we get 80 plays in this game and they get 60. So that helps us a lot because obviously they were very potent with the 60 they had. So it was good that we did that. So the other thing I guess I'm getting at is, well, what happened? Well, why did we actually statistically win this game in many places on the stat sheet, and yet it was such a tight, tense, hard-fought game? Well, one, it's kind of the story of when the defense did it, right? Letting them score on 5 consecutive drives and be all touchdowns, not even forcing a field goal in there, they maximize those points. On the kind of drives they did, you might have seen, them settle for a couple field goals. We settled for 3 out of 8. If they had settled for 2 or 3 field goals, then they would have been back down instead of 35 points. They would have been back down around 27 or 28 points. So that might have made a difference. And then the other thing is we settle for 3 field goals. And I would generally say that when your offense is humming like ours was, I kind of accept the idea that you're going to have a field goal a game. But I think when you have 3 field goals, you've probably set up. Now, of course, we had a lot of scoring drives. We didn't just score 5 or 6 times. We scored 8. So maybe that's not so bad. But generally speaking, I would say that I do think there is a little bit of a downside in the offense when it settles for 3 field goals. And so I would say we probably should have gotten touchdowns on 2 of those 3 drives. You can settle for 1 field goal. You shouldn't settle for 3. So 2 more touchdowns is 4 points each instead of the 3. So that's 8 points total. And also because of the circumstance of the game, where even though everybody kept scoring, they were able to start stretching ahead of us. Well, because we had settled for field goals and they were getting nothing but touchdowns, we were in a position where it made sense to go for 2 fairly early in the game, and we didn't get it. So that puts us another point off the board. It's a small thing. It's a small margin. But what I'm getting at is so we left what I would say we should have, you're always fine to take a field goal. A better finishing of those drives would have had those other 2 drives that ended in field goals get touchdowns. So you get 8 points there. You get 1 point for the missed extra point that you wouldn't have had to. I mean, the missed 2-pointer where you would have just kicked the extra point, because if you had gotten the touchdowns instead of the field goals, you wouldn't have had to go for 2. You would have stayed in better contact or even had a slight lead. So that's 9 points. So if you add the 9 points back in, that actually kind of looks like the game that was. You probably end up with a game that's more like 52-35. And honestly, the way our offense played and the way it went, that seems a little bit more befitting of where the stats are actually in this game and the way where things end up. So I kind of found that in the stats, and I thought it was an interesting observation I wanted to share with you. Another thing a couple things as we start to get towards the end of the observations and reactions. We talked about coming into this game. One of the things I mentioned was where we stood in terms of long offensive plays, generating long offensive plays. And I just stuck with the chart. They have charts on, over 10 yards, over 20 yards, 30, 40, 50, all the way up to 90. And obviously most teams don't have a lot of those. But excuse me, I'm really struggling here. Get a little water. See if that clears it up and I can finish up here. Offensively, we came into the game ranked 64th in plays of 10 yards or more. We had run 86 plays that ran for 10 yards or more. So 64th, right in the middle of the pack. We actually did well in this game. We had 14 plays of 10 yards or more, which actually improved our standing a little bit. We're up to 56th in the nation. So we moved off that Mendoza line or the middle line. We now have 100 plays on the season. That makes us 56th ranked team. Ole Miss came in as the 23rd ranked team and at 101 plays of 10 yards or more, and we let them have 11 plays in the game. That moved them up from 21 to 23, or 23 to 21, I'm sorry, and they had 11 plays. But I talked about how the point I made coming into the game was that we were a little lower. We're higher on the defense in terms of plays allowed. Like we came into this game defensively 19th in the country in allowing plays of 10 yards or more. We'd only allowed 59. They came into the game actually pretty decent, ranked 32nd, but we were 19. They had allowed 68 on the season. So, but we were able to have 3 more plays. The upshot of all this is we have 14 plays of 10 yards or more in this game. They have 11. And that might have been a little bit of a difference maker too, a little hidden thing in the stat sheet. We end up coming out of this game still pretty similar. Numbers don't change that much, but surprisingly, and I just thought that was surprising, the way the game went, it feels like they're kind of gashing us and that we're kind of grinding it out. And the time of possession and some of those things actually do show that. And yet we actually had a slight advantage in this game on plays of 10 yards or longer in the game. And that may have made some of a difference in the game too. Probably not a ton. Turnovers didn't end up mattering. We had a better turnover ratio coming into the game, but there were no turnovers in the game. So, nothing really to look at there. Like I said, third down conversion was basically a wash. And we each had 8 drives, which is a really low number. Again, I think the lowest we'd had previous in the season had been 10. And 10 to 13 is getting to be average in today's game. It had been more like 12 to 15 a couple years ago, but when they came up with the rules to help shorten the games a little bit more running clock, it's taken a few plays and a few drives off the chart for teams these days. So a couple other things. Again, overall, our offense, going back or kind of reviewing where I came in on the predictions. We looked at the matchups, and I said that I thought the UGA defense, I thought Kiffin would actually come out firing and that they would be very successful early, but that as we had done throughout the season, that our defense would start to make adjustments, and that overall Kiffin had not been consistently consistent against Kirby or consistently effective against Kirby Smart defenses, and that I thought, in the second half, we would see our defense right the ship. I certainly didn't expect it to be as long as it did, but you do have to tip the cap and say, wow, yet again, it looked bad for 3 quarters. And like I said, the stats maybe say it wasn't as bad as it looked. It had more to do with the timing. If they had scored, let's put it this way, if they had scored 5 of 8 drives, that's still too many. That's too efficient. You'd like to have them, the defense. I think another way of looking at defense, not just by points and not just by yards and not even just by yard by play, but is by drives and stops, right? So if you had the ball, I would have liked to have seen if you told me, okay, the other team's going to get the ball 8 times in the game, I'd say, wow, that's low. They say, what are you comfortable with them scoring? I would say 3, 4 tops. If we can hold them to 3 scores or 4 tops, and especially if we get a field goal or 2 in there, then we can win this game. So you tell me they're going to score 5 out of 8 times, I'll say, well, the good news is 5, you can win a game where the other team only scores 5 times because you can't get to 50 on 5 scores, okay? And it's good that they, I guess, only had 8 drives if they're going to score more than 50% of the time. So I guess it was good that they only had 8 drives. And again, that's not an accident. We played that way. That's kind of how the staff clearly designed this game to go. So kudos to them. Good strategy. It looked a little rough, and the defensive just lightning moment did eventually come. It wasn't late in the second half like it was against Auburn. It wasn't or in the first half and all of the second half. It wasn't the same thing against Alabama. We started riding the ship in the second half. The same thing against Tennessee. We started riding the ship in the second quarter and we dominated the third quarter. Well, that's not where it was. It was all the way into the fourth quarter. But the fourth quarter was as dominant as you could be. At one point when the Ole Miss got the ball, they gained 13 yards or 12 yards on their last desperation drive before they turned the ball over on downs. Before that, their previous drives in the fourth quarter had resulted in 1 yard. So at the point where we scored the field goal to go up by 8 and gave them the ball, we had owned the fourth quarter at that point 149 yards to 1. They would get that last drive and they would go 12 yards and then lose the ball on downs, finishing with just 13 yards. So we win the fourth quarter. I've said this already, but it's worth emphasizing. 17-0, outgaining them 149-13. I think it actually might have been 147 because you had 2 kneel downs and you lose a yard for each time of that. But we had gained before the kneel downs 149 yards. So the UGA defense against the Ole Miss offense did eventually win. It just and statistically they won a little better than it seemed. Okay, they held them to over 160 or 150, 160 yards below their season average. Points wise, just a little bit, 35 points when they averaged 38. The UGA offense against the UGA defense I talked about, I said I thought the UGA offense would generally win against the defense and grind out yards and grind out points and do enough to win the game. Well, they did that and exceeded my standards and hopes there. And I told you, when it came to coaching and special teams, I always believe in our special teams. This was another great special teams game. A couple games ago, I talked about how early in the season we were punting 3, 4, 5 times. We were seeing a lot of Drew Miller at first and then Brett Thorson when he was healthy enough to come. We had a last game against Auburn. I think we only had, we had more punts against Auburn, but against Kentucky, we only had 1 punt, and it was outstanding. And so, but we're getting back to that standard where the offense performed so well. It wasn't because of defensive greatness, but offense performed so well in this game. No punts. We don't punt at all. We don't see Brett Thorson. I love Brett Thorson. He's one of our best players. He's going to make some money as an NFL kicker for sure. But I don't mind when a game goes by and I don't see Brett Thorson, because that's a good day for the Georgia offense. And so we didn't get to see him on special teams. We didn't see any big returns. Peyton Woodring was asked to kick 3 field goals, a 51-yarder, a 42-yarder, and a 35-yarder, and he nailed all of those after missing his first field goal from under 50 yards in 2 years last week. So kudos to the coaching. I think Kiffin did a great job. I think he had his team ready. I think they never they played with heart, they played with energy, they tried. I do think that Kirby's fire, passion, and energy, the team again continued to look great. And Kirby talks about winning the fourth quarter. And here again, I don't know if it's because we were the better conditioned team or not. There's some jokes going around about Ole Miss and the discussion about yoga and doing yoga instead of, hard drills. But I don't know that it had anything to do with conditioning or not. But the idea that Georgia is the better, stronger team in the fourth quarter for whatever reason, absolutely was the case for all the stats I just pointed out. So, and again, I do want to say, look, I don't think this was the same as the other game. So I don't think this was, grit keeps coming up. And I do think this was another grit game. And I do think we saw the team consistently, even though they were getting beat a lot on defense. I do think we saw the team, and I guess just to round out, going back to the long plays and holding them to 350 yards, 160 yards less than their average. I think it's worth noting that the defense took away the run, gave away shorter passes, but didn't give away, other than the one busted play, didn't give away a lot of deep balls. And in fact, Georgia had more plays of 10 yards or more in the game than Ole Miss did. And so I think that speaks to the idea that I think the coaches had a plan, and I'm sure they'll tell you that they designed a defense, or hopefully a defensive plan, that was going to be a little bit more effective on the passes they were giving them. But Ole Miss and Kiffin, going back to the coaching matchup, Kiffin does a great job of seeing exactly what we're giving, which, was short and intermediate passes, and he gets the most out of them. He gets 5 touchdowns on 5 drives out of short and intermediate passes, because we took away the long ball and we took away the run, and they adjusted and they scored 5 touchdowns. So kudos to them, okay? And that made it feel like the defense wasn't getting as much done. And I would have loved to have seen them squeeze a little bit more out of what they took away. They did give away a lot on just that small and medium passes, having taken away as much as they did. But they did still take away. And when you're successful at saying, we're going to take this away, we're going to take this away, then you are forcing the other team to play within the boundaries that you have decided what they're going to be. They did a great job of taking everything you could get out of that boundaries we left. But it was still, in the end, it was still limiting enough that when it came time to just throw the final clamps on it, and when we finally had a lead, and I think that's why that 8-point lead was such a big deal, when you get that ball that last time, you're able to send everybody. You're able to really just ratchet up the pressure, because now, again, you have the comfort and you have limited time left. You're 2 minutes or less left in the game. You have an 8-point lead. So even in the worst case scenario, if they bust free and run the length of the field for a touchdown, they still have to get to a 2-point conversion. And that's just to tie you and send the game to overtime. You can't lose the game. And so I think we see Kirby and Schumann she'll take the gloves off the defense and really come after them. And we see some pressure, we see batted balls, we see errant throws, and all of that, and we see a team that's ready in the fourth quarter, despite how they've been beat. Again, they have that goldfish mentality, right? They're not thinking about how they gave up 35 points. They look like a dominant defense in the fourth quarter. They look like they've been killing them all game, and they're getting stronger. And the crowd is phenomenal. The noise level is amazing. The atmosphere is great. Again, Sanford Stadium and the fans, we've all done a great job of just making this an unbelievable environment. Game day, the place was packed, looked great. The fans, everything was just fantastic. We just continue to show out on TV and look like an elite program, from the fans all the way through to the product on the field. Yes, this team doesn't look like what we're used to, but this is it. This is what we talked about last week. This is the team we have this year. And you know what? It is exciting. Just like I said, coming into the season, hey, we don't know what this team's going to be. We're going to watch it evolve. And yes, it doesn't look like what we're used to, but here we are. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, we're back at number 5. People are realizing you can't count us out. You can't kill us, like Kirby said. You're going to have to accept that you talk about a playoff, you talk about the SEC, you're going to be talking about Georgia. You may have tried to count us out, but you can't. We're not classic Georgia, but as we've been saying all along, nobody's classic dominant anymore. We'll talk about Ohio State and the other teams later this week. We have 2 weeks now to we certainly will spend a lot of the second week next week talking about Florida. And now they have finally fired Billy Napier. So that's going to create a lot of uncertainty. So we'll talk about what's going on there. We're going to have nothing to look at because they have the off week like we do. So there's going to be a lot of speculation about what we're going to get out of Florida and no real answers. But we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the history of the Florida series. There's a lot to talk about there. So there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. But this week, we get a chance to really get back to saying this is the week we're going to take some time and we're going to look at the contenders. We're going to look at the SEC. We're going to look at the national playoff picture, and we're going to start to look at these matchups. And I think now I feel more buoyed. I mean, yes, I was losing confidence a little bit and wondering, is this really a team? I kept saying it's about not comparing to the greatest teams of Georgia 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but comparing to the other teams on the field out there that we're going to have to play. And I feel better and better about that because I see that the fire, the passion, the energy, the focus on taking away the run and running the ball is resulting in maybe not the kind of dominance that we used to see, but it's resulting in a game plan that has had us in the ability to win every game we've played so far, even the Alabama game. And winning that game, Alabama's looking more and more impressive with each and every game. We should have won that game. I've said it a million times. I won't explain it again right now. I'm sure I will before the season's over because I'll keep coming back to that. But we should have won that game. We did enough to win that game. We had the opportunity. But we still ended up within 3 points. And so, yes, games are closer. Talent is closer. It's hard to get the separation. And so when you play games like this, but it's really amazing and impressive that Georgia has been able to be in games where they're taking the best punch from Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss, a bunch of really talented teams, all which have some flaws and cracks, but still very talented teams. We've been able to take those punches and be the team that, 3 out of 4 times has come out on top. And so this is exciting. It's exciting. It's more exciting than I want it to be on a certain level, but in a way I kind of asked for this. It's interesting to not know what's going to happen. And that's the other impression I keep coming out of this. I made this mention coming into this game, but I'm going to say it again because this game really emphasized it. We have a team that can respond in a bunch of different ways. This game turned into a shootout. You want to play a shootout? We can play a shootout. The Tennessee game was a shootout. So we played 2 shootouts and we won. We also played a slugfest with Alabama and Auburn. And we won one of them by 2 scores and we lost another one by a field goal. And there's a lot of ways that came together, not the least of which is we fumbled the ball in field goal range and they got a field goal. So, you could argue we gave them that. So, I think we talked about, could Ole Miss blow us out? I told you this was the best chance that the team that had the best chance of anybody to blow us out. They certainly showed that could have been the case. We had a chance to blow them out as much as we scored. If we'd played better defense earlier, clamped down sooner, we could have blown them out. If we had actually been able to just convert some of those field goals into touchdowns. We actually could have won this game by 3 scores if everything else stayed the same, and all we did was score touchdowns at every drive like they did. So that ended up being, but the reality is we were that 1-score game, but we win it, we cover. It's very exciting. I predicted that I thought we'd win 31-21. I don't know if I can really claim being that close. 43-35. I said a 10-point win. We won by 8. I thought the game would be a little bit lower scoring. I didn't envision the shootout. I rarely would predict a shootout with us winning. It just doesn't seem like that's how we're likely to win the game. So I wouldn't have necessarily thought that, but I think in many ways the game flowed a lot like I thought. And going back to the gunner thing, I want to call out another stat for both the Georgia offense and Georgia in general, and for Gunner, which if a gunner really gets into the Heisman discussion, if Gunner ends up playing well enough down the stretch, and if he keeps playing like this and becomes a reason, or not the reason, but a reason Georgia's winning games in high-profile situations, then Gunner has a decent chance. Of course, a lot of this depends on what other people do, but Gunner has a decent chance of being invited to New York. Whether he's a winner or not, I'm not going to go that far yet. But I think he's in the discussion now, and he deserves to be. This last week elevated him from, nobody really thinking that way to he's in that discussion. And if he gets and stays in that discussion or has any traction in that discussion, it's not a singular Heisman moment, but another thing you'll look at, and people, and I know you've heard it already, but I just want to call it out. In the second half of the game, he's 12 for 12 for 135 yards and 3 touchdowns. And whatever he contributed running as well. 12 for 12 when the biggest pressure and the biggest moment is on. And I think that's the other thing we're seeing with this team. This team doesn't flinch under pressure. This team actually likes pressure. It's drawing from its coaches. They're drawing off of each other. They believe in each other, and they play with heart and energy. And, I'd love to see a dominant team that's just killing everybody offensive and defensively and putting up great stats. It would be easier on the heart. But this is fun. This is exciting. We don't know what we're getting. And I am proud of this team as a fan. I mean, a team that just doesn't get rattled, that doesn't lose composure, that plays with heart. Win or lose, a team that believes in itself and honestly plays better when under pressure, when under the gun, in the most extreme circumstances. That's actually maybe more exciting in some ways, or something more invigorating, something that you can really be proud of as a fan. Than a team that is a front runner and doesn't necessarily show a lot of heart or energy, or as a front runner has trouble adjusting to when they do get punched in the mouth. This team actually starting to feel as maybe I was hesitant before. I heard somebody make a good analogy. They said you got to cut the head off the snake. That we're the snake, and you got to cut the head off the snake. I think it was Josh Pate. I think he said that on his college football show Reactions this week. He said it's, you got to cut it off. You just hit it with a shovel and it comes back to life and it bites you. But you cut the head off and then it's dead. And nobody has cut the head off except for Alabama. And even that was tenuous, right? We almost bit them. That's an interesting analogy. I mentioned once I was hesitant. When you think of can't kill them, you think about how cockroaches would survive nuclear winter and everything that they used to talk about back in the 80s, when everybody was afraid nuclear winter was, tomorrow. But the last thing I want to do is go with the analogy of cockroaches. I like Kirby Smart adopting, the mantra of saying, hey, you can't kill us. And yes, we did get killed the one time, or we suffered the defeat, but we're not going down easy. We just keep coming back. And, I think I certainly can get behind that. I'm certainly proud of a team that never gives up and never dies. Maybe the analogy I was heading towards here is this is starting to feel a little bit more like Rocky. You know how when you watch the Rocky movies, Rocky actually, not only does he start out losing and looking terrible, not like a guy who could win any fight, much less than the championship fight. That's how it usually starts in the beginning of the game, right? Or the beginning of the fights in the Rocky movies. But there's always also that point where Rocky basically sticks his face out and he's like, come on, Come on. And he drops his defense and he basically takes punches. It's like he's just not actually ready to win until he's taken a few bloody punches to the mouth. And he's bleeding and he's spitting out blood and his eyes are starting to swell up. And when he's really been hit and he's got mad, then he turns around and he goes from being like the guy who's going to be laughed out of the ring and beaten to death, it looks like, to the guy who knocks the other guy out and just looks like, at least for, one round, the round that matters, the one that leads to the knockout, he looks like the best fighter in the world. Well, I guess that's what we got right now. If it was always just fluky plays and weird things that were happening and we were pulling out these wins, I might not feel so good about it. But you are still talking about just periods of dominance. And the good news is, with a quarterback performing like Gunner, 12 of 12 in the second half, winning games like he did against Auburn, just getting beat up and coming back. And I'm sure you've heard the stories too about how he practiced hurt and he played hurt. There was even a consideration he might not be able to go in this game, or they're going to have to pull the run plays because he had so much abdominal pain and from just being hit so much in the Auburn game. But he goes out there and he does it, and this is why his teammates love him. This is why they play hard for him. And this is why they believe in him, but also because he's making the throws and he's making the plays and he's playing at a high level. Even if he's missed some reads along the way, even if he's growing into the job, he is really playing at a superbly high level, and his leadership is off the charts. I guess, again, what I'm trying to wrap it up to say is, look, if you didn't have that level of elite play developing on offense, if you didn't see as many weapons, and again, by the way, kudos, shout out to Lawson Lucky, 3 touchdowns. Finally, tight ends other than Brock Bowers are catching touchdowns in games for Georgia. And the tight ends in general had a really big game in this game. It's at least the second game now that we've had, not second in a row necessarily, but at least the second game where tight ends have performed well. We'll break all this down later this week on the details. But, just kudos to the tight ends getting involved. Lawson Lucky finally having a game worthy of what we thought we would see from him, and Gunner finding him and using him when Colby Young gets out of the game, and maybe would have been a guy you look for in those positions. But I guess with all the weapons and things that the offense is doing well and grinding out and being consistent, the one thing you could still say is, look, there's still a ton of upside. We're 6-1. Number 5 in the country, thoroughly in the playoff and SEC discussion, and we have yet to play a complete game. We have yet to see our other than Kentucky, but I mean against an elite team, against a really good team, we have yet to see the team go out and put together a game like the last time Ole Miss came to town, where we did beat them 52-17 and looked like the best team in the country doing it. When we put the whole game together, we're putting together on defense. Offense, I think, is doing their job for the most part. Defense is putting together a quarter like they did this game, or a half and a quarter, maybe 2.5 quarters total. The defense is put together at best in some of these games against tougher opponents. But they've also spotted those opponents some big advantages and seen those people take a lot from them before they started giving. But I guess where I'm going with this is to say, look, there's talent there, and they could pull it all together. They could just start to click, get more and more pass rush, cover those positions better, shut down the other team earlier in the game, and then consistently continue doing it like they did in the third and fourth quarters of all these games, like they did in the fourth quarter of this game. If they can do it for a quarter, they could do it for a game if it just came together. So there's still upside out there. This is still a team that could develop much like Ohio State last year, where you come into the playoff with 2 losses and a little bit of a disappointed fan base, but then you put it all together and your offense clicks and your defense clicks and you win games by 21 points a game and you steamroll through the playoffs. We've seen enough from this team to be optimistic enough. I'm not saying that will happen. I'm not guaranteeing that. But I'm saying we've seen enough now that we should be optimistic despite it looking so different than we're used to, and say there's enough here to get really excited about, to let your hopes get up and say they could pull it all together. They can do enough in any one game to win against anybody. But they could actually author a game somewhere out here in the future where they all of a sudden look like the team we used to see. that just can win in every phase of the game all game long. So I'm excited. This was a big game. It was a big moment for Georgia football. It looked great on TV. It looked great on game day. Fans were awesome. The stripe job didn't come out quite as the people on the black section of the stadium. Students kind of did their job. The other alums on that side of the stadium did not really come in black, so I don't know if they didn't get the memo. The white stripe was pretty cool, and obviously the people in red, there's always a bunch of people in red. So it's a cool idea. It didn't quite come together as much as we might have thought, but overall, though, I think the passion and energy from the fans was fantastic. The setting was great. The university and the team and everybody represented the school and the UGA and all of us alums and all of us fans at a really high level again. So this was a great game. It was super exciting, and it's just part of what is being a dramatic and exciting season. And let's just revel in it. Let's see where we go. We got some big games ahead. We still got Texas. We still got Florida. We still got Georgia Tech. And look, I've talked about having the Georgia Tech rivalry be one of the biggest games in the country. Well, if that game was staged right now, it's a neutral site game in a premier stadium in one of the best football towns in America, and it would be number 5 versus number 7. It would be one loss versus undefeated. That's what you have right now in the Georgia Tech matchup, and I hope we get to that. I hope it finishes with that. I still hope we win it, obviously, and maybe that's the game that we put it all together and play our best game. But Tech, should be favored in all their remaining games, at least until an ACC championship. We are probably going to be favored in all of our remaining games. So it's pretty exciting. There's a lot to look at here. So, we'll talk about it some more. But for now, just keep reveling, just keep smiling. Think about what happened on Saturday. Think about how great Sanford Stadium looked. Think about how great Athens looked and how great we showed out on national TV. And let's just ride high and until our next podcast, which will be day after tomorrow. Go Dogs.